I don't know what we're doing.
Hello and welcome to Strive and Thrive. Strive and Thrive is a collection of discussions featuring guests from various fields, focused on guiding entrepreneurs in creating businesses that excel in every aspect: people, planet and profit. Throughout the series, you can join us, Romesh and Mike, as we explore relevant topics with our guests which can help businesses thrive.
Romesh and I met whilst I was working as a strategic consultant a few years ago. I needed finance director support and I reached out to him and his team. Since then, we've become good friends. We share a passion for business and entrepreneurship. If you like today's discussion and you want to subscribe on our YouTube channel or Spotify channels, please reach out. Brilliant. Today, I would like to welcome to Strive and Thrive, John Sandall. Welcome, John.
Hello.
It's good to have you on. So I've known John for a few years now, and we've worked on some really interesting projects, John, from projects in the Home Office. But before I introduced you, I was thinking, what am I going to say about John and I and the projects we've worked on in the introduction? I have to talk about the project we did in Salisbury. The point with which we were trying to use artificial intelligence tools to try and find me in the city centre with 3 teams running around with AI solutions. It was such a fascinating project in where AI technology was even 12 months ago, and also how humans trust, interact, have fun with AI, and maybe how they get frustrated over reliance. There was so much amazing learning on that project. So really welcome, John. Thanks for joining us. And would you like to introduce yourself, and then we'll pass on to Romesh and I for sort of chatting.
Yeah, thank you very much. So my name is John Sandall. I'm the CEO of a company called Coefficient, which I founded sort of 10 years ago. Took a while to incorporate the company, but this will be sort of the 10th year since I bit the bullet and decided to be my own boss. And it's been an absolutely wild ride from 2015 to 2025, seeing the change of this industry that we now find ourselves in, of AI. It was nothing like what we see today back in 2015. And in some ways, nothing has changed. Some bits have changed a lot and some bits not at all. And it's been absolutely amazing. And maybe the greatest privilege for me is just seeing all the different ways that this technology can be applied across different industries, across private sector, healthcare, e-commerce, finance, all the way through to the incredibly valuable public sector work, some of which we've delivered together, Mike.
Excellent, John. It's really good to have you here. Welcome. The first thing I have to say is congratulations on hitting 10 years. I think that's a huge achievement for any business. So many businesses fail in early years, and to be here strong and thriving at this point is very impressive in itself. I say that because, you know, my business, the FD Consultant, is 5 years old this year. I can't believe actually how quickly time has flown, but you know, that's part of the course, isn't it? But John, I'd love to hear about your personal journey to become, you know, the CEO of Coefficient. What are your passions and motivations, and what were the signposts? What got you here?
So I think I can speak to, you know, the people who are running companies at the moment, the people who are thinking about maybe running a company in the future, the people who are still in universities and having that massive stressful existential experience of what the hell do I do with my life, and maybe for even people who are running companies, you're still having that experience. I feel like you know, I still wonder, what am I going to do with my life when I grow up? For me, it's just been mildly surprising. I think the through line from everything is it's really rewarding to be able to deliver value, to be able to do something useful, do something practical, to develop skills that you have expertise in, and then to be able to actually use those to change the world for the better. That is the one through line. But the way that you do that in life can be very different from person to person, whether it's through assisting Mike with his finances, all the way through to building AI solutions to help identify a lost person in Salisbury. For me, I had no idea. I'm a mathematical graduate. I went to Imperial. I ended up specializing in statistics. That was the first surprise. 2.5 years in to my degree, if you spoke to me in the pub, you would have thought that I really didn't like it. It was just one of these strange disciplines, and I couldn't quite tally up how what we were learning on paper actually made any difference in the real world. It felt so theoretical, and it's all, it was all about formulae and generating functions, and it was very pure. And yet, I think what happened was you get these life-changing moments in your career, especially as an entrepreneur and founder. I think all of us has these moments which just changed everything for us. For me, it was winning a biological research council-funded placement in one of the years of university to study biological mathematics, to study effectively what we know called genomics. And in order to do that, I had to go and relearn statistics, all of those lectures that I've been sort of phoning home a little bit. I'm like, what is this all about? And then suddenly I just had to go and relearn everything. But I also discovered the world of statistical computation. And maybe that was the thing that made it click for me. I've always been a developer since I was a kid. I made websites. It was fun. It's cool to make things. But being able to use those skills for statistics instead of pen and paper, that's when things clicked for me. And then I realized, here is a technology. I discovered machine learning in that summer. Here is a technology where you can feed it a massive information. In that case, it was a genome of a whole organism, and that's your input. And you can define these vague outputs. In this case, what happens, you start poking the genome of organisms and what changes. And all sorts of things change. Some of them get bigger, some of them get smaller, some of them change and mutate into completely different things. And when you observe the outputs and the inputs, turns out machine learning, and especially statistical computation, is this very powerful tool that can tell you, how do we go from A to B? How do we go from the input to the output? And honestly, if I was to just fast forward all the way to 2025, that's kind of the same job to be done. You just realize that same skill set is valid. We're using different tools now. We're not using MATLAB and R. We're using Python and Rust. We're using different technologies. Someone invented applications within deep learning, let alone machine learning. Python became a valuable tool for doing data scientific work within the last 10, 15 years alone. It went from a pretty middling low language in terms of popularity to the #1 language in the world a few years ago. And I've witnessed that journey, the world of deep learning. Another example, I remember having a statistical pattern recognition lecturer 15, 20 years ago telling me, this world of deep learning, neural networks, it's a curiosity. It will never be useful. It's all about decision trees and random forests and logistic regression. And suddenly the world changed. GPUs became viable as a technology for accelerating the learning speed.
I'm just going to stop you there, just because I don't know what a GPU is.
Yeah.
So just to kind of keep it simple and straightforward. Mm-hmm. What I'm getting message-wise from you is that you're very much interested in the theory, but you're also really animated about the practical application of that theory. I think that's where you're passionate, and I think that's an incredible thing. And obviously that has informed your path all the way to the AI, kind of world of which you're in now. So when you left university, what were your next steps, just at high level? What kind of roles were you fulfilling, John?
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like there's a very natural thing that happens where you always move into the role where you feel like you have a lot of capability and capacity to do that role. And so I ended up moving straight from university into working for Apple. I think, again, an amazing moment in time. For me, a stroke of luck. Honestly, when you've got 400 applications for an internship role, there isn't a lot to differentiate the best of you. So very, very thankful for these early experiences, because that put me into the one of the strongest, hardest work ethic companies I've ever experienced. Working in or with the dozens to maybe hundreds of teams that I've worked with now in my career. One of the best work ethics and just absolute obsession with the quality of your work, the accuracy of your work. When you're coding in R or Excel, or you're putting together a PowerPoint deck or Keynote deck in Apple, it has to be pixel perfect. Like everything, there cannot be a number that is wrong. If you're using a footnote referencing some other data set, someone's going to check that and they're going to double check your work. So that level of rigor was an amazing experience at a foundational period of my life, which I then took on outside of Apple as I became a founder for the first time. Learned Python, learned C# for mistakeful reasons, but learned Python, learned to build websites, learned to become a full stack software engineer and a founder. And then sort of at that point, realized all of these things that I have as an experience, whether it's as a business analyst, whether it's as a statistical machine learning, researcher, whether it's as someone who knows how companies work and can do sort of the business analytics around startups. And then suddenly 2012, 2013 rolls around and I hear this phrase, data scientist. I'm like, this is great. This is all of the things I am. I just didn't know that there was a role for this. Some guy in LinkedIn and Google got together and they invented this phrase just to make it easier to hire. It turns out people like me, they just they drew a big circle around all the skills that they wanted and called it a data scientist, which has
I don't know the story. I don't know the story, John, but what made you make the move to create Coefficient? What was the point with which you took the jump? Because it's a big step for a lot of people to go from a big job to a startup and setting something up yourself. What was was it purpose in terms of outcome, data, entrepreneurship? What was the kind of driver for you?
So I spent, from that point where I discovered the phrase data scientist, I spent 2 years, first of all, as the first data science hire in a very fast-growing startup called YPlan, which is a events mobile ticketing startup based in London. And I watched it grow from 5-6 people to over 150 people. We grew from London to Edinburgh, New York, San Francisco, Las Vegas, and beyond. And it was an amazing experience in 2013 to be in the startup scene in London, first and foremost, but also to be figuring out what the hell does a data science team in a startup do? Nobody knew this. And all these teams were intersecting with, you've got the marketing team saying, what do you do? And the sales team saying, we don't need data, we say words. And you've got the technology team saying, apparently recommender systems are useful, let's build one. And we're figuring all this stuff out on the fly. And I get to hire these incredible group of people and work with some of the most amazing technological and engineering talent ever. And I spent 2 years doing that, and we solved these incredible problems, whether it's, like developing world-class A/B testing methodologies and frameworks and talking about that at conferences, which we can come back to, the world of conferences. So that's been a very important sort of thing in my career. But also just figuring out, like, what is a data scientist? And then what is a data analyst? And how do you build a modern data analytics and data science stack? And after a couple of years of this, I could see the value that this entire world has for all of the business functions that didn't know what to do with data. And that's the point where I thought I really would like to do this for a whole suite of companies. We've seen how to master the art of building a data science analytics team in a startup. There's a lot of startups in London, and it was 2015 at the time, and I thought this is a thing that I would really love to bring this level of expertise to as many companies as possible, to democratize. Instead of building a multi-million-dollar data science team, which many small companies just cannot do, even with VC funding, it takes a little while to get there. How many companies can we bring this to? So that was the first, I would say, 6 years of Coefficient. It was working with SMEs, working with startups, and just bringing this best practice, state-of-the-art technology and ways of working. How do we actually build a data platform that is reliable? How do we build that dashboarding technology that's reliable? Sometimes it's not the fancy AI that brings the most value. Sometimes it's straight up just a supply-demand analysis that is crunching numbers, but doing it accurately and doing it in a timely fashion, and then presenting that results to operational teams to act on them on a daily basis.
So, John, you mentioned the importance of conferences as part of your journey. What was the significance of that? Is that the collaboration, the sharing of knowledge, the meeting of people, or all of them, or something else?
Yeah, I feel like this is something that's been obvious to me for well over 10 years, because I've been in this open community of data scientists and AI and data practitioners. And this is a thing that I find people in large organizations and within government are beginning to talk about now. We've got all of these silo teams of people working on things, and some of them have figured out the hard way, because it's always the hard way. There's no easy way. Unless you learn from someone else, it's always the hard way. And when I say hard way, this is a massive value opportunity. The hard way is 6 months of hard grind to get from A to B. The easy way is to go to a conference talk, realize all the pitfalls, avoid them, and it takes maybe 4 weeks instead of 12. It's such a different pace of work if you can learn from other people's experiences and learn what not to do. Because again, this is basically research. Data science or machine learning, it's not software engineering. Someone asks you to say, when is it going to be done? And the answer is, I don't know. We're doing something no one's ever done before. So if you can learn from other people's experiences, you can dramatically, order of magnitude, accelerate your delivery as a team. Therefore, being able to go to monthly events, and there are lots of different communities for this, but the one I'm going to highlight is the one, we've got a little duck here. This is my PyData duck. PyData is an amazing organization. Something that I went along to these meetups and conferences for good 8 years, just as a punter, learning, stealing, perfecting my art, honing. And when someone says, what do you know about convolutional neural networks? The first thing I'm going to do is maybe go and watch that talk I saw 2 years ago on convolutional neural networks, which explained everything I need to know by someone who's literally a world expert in the field. And this is, again, it's a superpower. I can't describe it any different way. Whether you are a consultant or a freelancer or working in a larger team, it's a superpower to be able to go along to these things, which cost you nothing except for the conferences. And you learn and take away so much. Now, the reason it's become important to me is after about 8 years of sort of feeding on this world and this community, I decided to give back. So now I am one of the organizers of PyData London. It's the largest data meetup group in the world with 15,000 people in the community. We run monthly events, and we also have a conference coming up. So a little opportunity just to pitch that if you're a data scientist, you're listening, or if you have a data science team, we've got open call for proposals, and then a conference which costs but just a couple $100 for 3 days of intensive talks and workshops in June. So do check it out. It is a superpower in waiting.
Good plug there, John. I like it. Yeah, but I'm really buying into the collaboration, the sharing of knowledge, the building of something on top of something else that, or that someone has already achieved. That's great, and I think that is immensely powerful. John, we had an amazing discussion with Matt Mullen in our last Strive and Thrive episode, and Matt Mullen's a futures thinker, and he feels that we're still in the early stages of AI, and there's still an awful lot to learn. Can you give us your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I would subscribe to. There's a chap. He's I think head of data science at Wikipedia, called Chris Alban, who has been inspirational for me for a very long time. And he said a year or two ago, as this ChatGPT stuff was coming out and the world was going absolutely wild for it, and as data science or AI practitioners, it's not such a big surprise. If you're in this world, suddenly the news media goes berserk over something that we've known for months or years. Like, it's a smooth transition to us, not a step change. But as far as front page is concerned, it's a step change. So that's one thing to remember, is we kind of know what the future is probably going to look like, because it's a much more predictable trend rather than these big surprises for those who are in the industry and invested in it. So I agree with him. He said this idea that we're not, is AI done? Is it nearly done, or is it barely begun? Like that's sort of the phrase that I've heard discussed. And he said, yeah, barely begun. We are standing about a foot deep in water, marveling at how much water there is, having never seen water before, not realizing there's an ocean behind us. And that's kind of how I feel about it. From everything that I'm seeing so far, there is so much more to come, whether that's terrifying or inspiring. Like, there's a lot of opportunities in that. There's a lot of threats. There's a lot of risks. And as someone who is obsessive about this field, working for both companies and governments, we touch every single one of those, the opportunities and the risks. But I think barely begun. I think there's a lot to see coming down the line.
That's a superb analogy. The kind of ocean behind you. That's a really good way to kind of picture that potential opportunity and risk, and it's interesting, and I think good that you acknowledge that. Just on a very practical level, because I'm a finance director, I don't have the data science background, I'm not a scientist, but trying to bring things to a practical level as an entrepreneur of an SME business, how do you keep pace with the changes in AI? It's evolving so rapidly. Do you have any kind of practical tips as to how to keep abreast of what's going on?
There's a lot of different ways to answer that. If you want to just stay abreast of the latest developments, again, there is no reason for me to plug something. I don't have any stake in it, but I really like Ben's Bites. It's a free newsletter. And for me, there's a bunch of these. They're kind of similar. But there's a lot of people who are putting out little weekly summaries. Here's everything that happened in AI this week. That's just one that I like. And honestly, it's the easiest way. If you're just feeling that fear, that existential anxiety, like, what am I missing? But it's also very, very cutting edge. So I'm going to now answer it a completely different way, which is, but what should you be doing? Should you be building and deploying these latest generative AI tooling that's, every single week there's like another 20 things that you should know about? I think the word should is problematic there. Should you know about them? Maybe not. What should you be doing? I would say focus on the core things of your business. So as a founder, I'm going to take the AI hat off and put the founder hat on. The core things are your KPIs, your unit economics, and your metrics. Do you know what they are? For many, I don't know, like startups, what's your CAC? What's your lifetime value? There are variants of this. You've got your, David McClure's pirate metrics, but these are sort of the fundamentals for a starting point to how to think about data for your business. So do you have a way to, back of the envelope, understand how much it costs for you to acquire a new customer or a new lead? Do you have a way to back that out against what their value is? Are you prioritizing your time? Are you spending a lot of time on low value customers? Do you have a good go-to-market approach? I think that's the starting point, because if you start there, then you start working through your data pipelines. And that's the other thing. For a larger company, then it usually have those things well defined, especially if you have investors. You probably might have issues with data pipelines. The finance team is doing their own analytics, the marketing team is doing their analytics, and the engineering product analytics team has got their own stack entirely. And when the CEO says, right, so how many new customers did we acquire this month, and what's our revenue? And you're getting 3 different answers. The finance team is probably giving you net revenue, gross revenue, and several other different forms of it besides. Everyone's got slightly different answers. So it's moving towards, this is not AI. This is data engineering or data analytics or analytics engineering. If you're in like the hyper modern data stack world, that's what we call it. There is actually a really great set of tooling for actually deploying that as well. That's relatively, I would say it's appropriate for teams of 50 people and above. Should be looking at that. If you want to see more about that, I did a whole talk at PyCon Germany last year. Just Google my name into YouTube and you'll find it all about the modern data stack. Because these are the basic things, and we're still not into the world of machine learning yet. But once you've got those basics sorted, then you've got really cool things you can do. You can do, like I said, supply-demand analysis. Where do you have more supply than you have demand, especially if you're a marketplace? But then you can start using machine learning to dramatically optimize that, to figure out where are the opportunities. If we were to build our product this way, or to launch into this market, or to target this particular part of the country with an advertising campaign, what would happen? If we were to provide a load of inventory in this new product area, what would happen? If we were to change our pricing, what would happen? You can start asking these counterfactual questions using machine learning models. That is some of the greatest value that I've seen delivered for your sort of mid-size Series A, Series B startups. It can be completely transformational. I think one analysis started making about $30,000 a month of additional revenue off the bat. And I would love to see more companies be able to figure out how to achieve that for themselves.
And do you see the people need to be technical? I know you answer always the questions technically, John, but you're a very use case orientated person. What's your view on the kind of, there's often sales marketeers or founders, they're not going to be playing with some of these tools. The data and analytics piece is done by other people. What's your view on how some of these people should be really thinking about the capabilities that we know are both there now and coming, to your point that it's moving every week? How should they kind of approach this and address it, do you think?
So I'll defer to the first answer. For the smaller organizations or sort of the the solo founders, You've got the ability to have like an AI marketer, an AI sales tool. You've got all of these things. So the coders, you've got the AI coding tools like Cursor and Devon. These are the tools that are probably worth looking into. And again, therefore, something like those Ben's Bite style newsletter where they've got there's an Airtable you can get access to with every tool you can ever imagine because they're keeping track of it all. That's value. That's really, really useful to stay on top of it all. I think that is a workflow automation capability that Gen AI brings us more than anything. But how do you use those tools well? Or if all you're using is ChatGPT, how can you better use that well? Again, like risk flag. There is, depending on the company that you're in or the industry that you're in or the sector you're in, there's a lot of private information that's flowing into ChatGPT these days. So there are different ways of working. If it is private, we do a lot of work with government. Do we use ChatGPT? No, we do not. We use, if we need the capabilities, we can use a local tool. So it is very easy on a Mac, at least. You can download LM Studio. It is a very beautiful, easy to use application, and it's basically ChatGPT that's running just on your laptop. And therefore, if you're loading information and documents and stuff into it, it's not going anywhere. It's not breaching your confidentiality. It's not putting that information onto OpenAI servers. So that's one useful thing. If you are thinking, I'd love to use ChatGPT, but I cannot because of the security implications, then you could use LM Studio, for example. But then how do you use that and how do you effectively use that? And there are so many good tips and tricks for utilizing these tools. But if there was one that would give away that I think more people should do, if you don't do this already, just get it to interview you. As a consultant, what do? I come to you, I ask you some questions, you answer the questions, I echo the synthesis of the questions back at you, say, is that about right? Did I miss anything? And then I tell you the answer. You can get the AI to do that for you. Here's my problem, ask me some questions, wait for my answers, ask follow-up questions if you need, and then do some internet research and give me your answer. And that is an absolute, again, superpower in this day and age that you kind of have to manually know how to do for yourself.
Research tool is amazing in effect to do that kind of analysis of kind of an interesting problem and sort of help you learn, right? That's the way I use it, really help you learn. Do you think, I know you and I have touched on this a little bit, some people are holding and waiting for some sort of magic point at which AI will become useful to them and just sort of sticking with the status quo. Do you think there'll be a flip point? And the next question off the back of that is, also, we know that people in those organizations are probably already using ChatGPT or Copilot or other solutions out there at the moment, or even more complex tools. What's your view on how people should navigate that kind of wait and see versus it's probably already happening?
I would say already happening. So if you go back about a year or so, you've got a statistic. It came, this is actually sourced from The Economist. They said roughly 5% of US companies are actively using or have AI policies, whereas 90% of workers, 80% of workers are using AI tooling. So you've got this huge disparity between people using shadow AI tooling kind of secretly. Now, maybe that's within the AI policy if there was one, they're doing it locally using LM Studio, but I imagine a lot of it is ChatGPT and Claude and now DeepSeek. So all of that private company data, for the lack of an organization's AI policy, all of the data is now sort of flying over to servers all around the world. But I think that's changing. I think it is dramatically changing. So McKinsey actually put out a report recently, just a few months ago, that said that now what they're seeing is 60% of businesses are now actively adopting AI. I still think that's wild. That's 40% of businesses that are not actively looking to adopt AI. That's a lot. But even within the 60%, 20% of those actually are finding that they're scaling that usage beyond just tiny, tiny trials. So there's clearly a journey that a lot of organizations are on to, first of all, figure out that adopting it is a good idea, understanding how to explore the risks and mitigate them, and then go beyond just tiny pilots here and there to real value delivered. And that's where we're not at yet. We're in the internet 1995 era where businesses are kind of looking at this thing thinking it's a bit weird, it's different to what we've done before, but it's going to change literally everything in terms of how we work.
I love the example. I'm going to pick it up now, because especially with Romesh being an FD, the ability for an AI solution to help you build and do all your spreadsheets, which will scare any person like me who loves a good spreadsheet. But I think that's a good example, right? When it's really, that will start to disrupt, but also do things really interestingly.
but it's not here yet. The question of what is coming down the line, what is yet to be. There's a lot of people saying we're basically done. ChatGPT 4, ChatGPT 5, the next iteration, or DeepSeek. What is there left to do? Spreadsheets. That's a big one. These AIs are trained on text. They are trained on predicting the next word, or like predicting the words in the middle of a block of text. And it's amazing what you can do when that's all it's been trained on. But that's text. The basis for it is text. Or we talk about multimodal AI, image, audio, video, great. All sorts of cool things you can do with that. But multimodal for me is like a whole step beyond. What about an LLM that's not really an LLM, like a spreadsheet LM, that is trained on the raw data being not text in a linear format, but you've got these relational concepts in a spreadsheet. You've got formulas. You've got a much more complicated way of representing a thing. In this case, whether it's a business model or a financial plan or your VAT return. It's a completely different kind of thing. It's a different kind of data. And yes, you can turn those into text and therefore feed it into ChatGPT, but none of them are trained on it. So, if I had a spare $1 billion lying around, I'd love to solve that problem, but someone will, and that's still to come.
There you go, Romesh.
What do you think the time frame for that would be? He said looking at the calendar with a bit of sweat on his brow.
I would say keep an eye on what companies are getting funded and who is looking at these things. Again, that's only one other modality format, and there are so many more. So then it's a lot of exciting things happening in the world around interactions. So interactions as a data format, where the input, again, where did I start this entire journey? Realizing that there are a lot of problems in the world that can be solved as here's an input, here's an output, figure out the stuff in the middle and how to go from A to B, or why we go from A to B. That's a different kind of question. Explain how we got from A to B. And interactions are a big one. So there are lots of companies that are building recordings of, given a problem, the question, the input would be, book me an Uber ride, for example. And then the data that's recorded is all the interaction you have to go through on your iPhone to click and order the Uber ride. And I know that Apple is looking to this. I know that Google is looking to this. And there's dozens of sort of well-funded companies looking to just creating the data, let alone the agent models, so large action models, LAMs, that will be able to then start to do this for yourself. So at some point, there'll be a version of Google Assistant or Siri or something where you don't need to have the developer of an application actually explicitly code how to use it. It'll figure out how to use it by just looking at it on the screen. These apps are designed for 5-year-olds. So I think sort of the new LAMs will be able to do it too.
Brilliant. I'm definitely getting a real feeling, and it's something that I've thought for a long time. You've got to embrace it, haven't you? You've got to take the opportunities that AI presents you and your business, and I feel that it's the businesses that are front-footed and really open-minded to those opportunities that will kind of be a step ahead, basically. And that goes down to individuals at all levels and their skills. You've got to welcome this change in order to make the most of it, and because otherwise you're going to be left behind. I think that's a key message. But John, in one of your earlier answers just now, you mentioned DeepSeek, in comparison to Chat GPT. Do you have any views on the race to AI supremacy? There's been a lot of that in the news lately. The US seems to have been quite rattled by the emergence of DeepSeek, and why so, and how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, so if I take an opportunity to just reflect back on the last 10 years, and we can maybe see how the next 10 years might play out. The last 10 years has been, in the world of deep learning, this point, was it 15, 20 years ago, where you've got lectures saying this is a completely useless technology, people are trying to simulate how brains work and it doesn't work at all, to being this game-changing thing that everyone talks about every day. Maybe that's because I'm an AI practitioner, but I don't know, it seems to come up in the news a lot. So how do we get there? It's these moments, there are some step change moments, but there's lots of them. I say it looks kind of gradual if you track them all through the world of research, all the papers that are published. But there are some landmark moments throughout that. There was a point when, again, we really, really learn how to use GPUs effectively. These are, I mentioned them earlier, they're the things that are inside your PlayStation, right? and they were designed for PlayStations and Nintendos. And then someone realized that making a PlayStation, making Crash Bandicoot and Mario Kart work like it does is exactly the same mathematics as making a neural network. It's just big old squares of numbers flying around and being squashed. And therefore, it turns out you get a 50x speed boost on how quickly you can train these models. And it turned out that maybe we thought they were useless, but they just needed 50 times more training than we had anticipated to actually get them to do anything simple. And then someone invented something else which made the training go faster. And then another landmark invention came along, and just the costs of doing the training and the speed at which you could train started getting orders of magnitude faster and cheaper until we are where we are today. It's been a series of these sort of little moments in time. And I think we'll continue to see that. What is DeepSeek? It is trained on a lot of OpenAI's outputs. As far as I don't know this is conjecture, but we believe that they've done a lot of training. Basically, if you're trying to replicate GPT-4, then why don't you ask it lots of questions, capture the output, and get DeepSeek to copy it or learn to copy it? That is one way of doing training. And to be honest, did OpenAI maybe use data that they shouldn't have? Yeah. And Meta has just come out this week saying that they've been downloading terabytes or petabytes of textbooks and the rest of it to try and train their Llama models. So this is a world where there is lots of legal complexity and nuance about whether it's okay to use the data. But at the end of the day, the key thing is whoever is at the front of the pack, in my mind, they're the ones that are blasting through boulders, taking the slow route. And everyone else is able to move just a little bit faster to catch up because they can see which route was the right route in the first point. And I think if DeepSeek takes a lead, then they'll start moving slower unless they have more innovations. And that's the other thing that the DeepSeek team did bring to the table, was not just the ability to catch up because they can see what good looks like, but also they had some pretty amazing maths behind the scenes that makes the sort of cost of computation come down again. And that's nothing new. We've seen that happening dozens and dozens of times. I think Chinese researchers put out about 40% of papers worldwide at the moment versus US researchers just over that. So we should expect this. We should expect the inventions to be coming out distributed along with where the academic research is happening and where the papers are coming out. And I think it's not necessarily a landmark moment where it's not like the space race. It's a bad analogy. There's going to be landmark inventions coming out of the UK and France, where there's amazing investment programs happening in public investment in AI, foundation model tooling and companies. So I expect this to be a very global thing if we're to look to the future. But I also expect a lot more of these innovations where things will get faster and cheaper until someone realizes that once you've got something that's so fast and so cheap, you can do something that just feels absolutely ostentatious, like NVIDIA coming out last month and saying, we're going to use this to basically generate your entire game environment on the fly around you, which just seems ridiculous. But you can do that now once things get fast and cheap enough. I think we'll see a lot more of that too.
So do you think it's still a processing power then, John, question? Or do you think there's an S-curve in the innovation curve where something will take another leap? Because I'd say publicly ChatGPT made a big step change, right? And I agree with your point. The technology's linear, but the step change was phenomenal. Do you see anything in there that is sort of a barrier at the moment to another S-curve going on within AI? Or do you see a turn or a different direction potentially?
So I think I am fully with there's a chap called Andrew Ng, who's quite famous within the AI industry. He's sort of created one of the first big courses to learn AI for free. And he said recently the most exciting place to be in the entire AI world at the moment, it's not in the research teams who are building these models, it's in the application layer. And so if you are working with real customer problems, you're solving problems using these foundation models, because under the hood, it's almost like becoming a utility. It's like switching your electricity provider. I'll go from Claude to OpenAI to DeepSeek. And some of these things are open source, so you can do it privately. The Llama models, the DeepSeek models, I can run them on my laptop, which is absolutely astonishing as well. So you've got different levels of capability. A bit like cloud computing, it's going to be similar to that. Cloud computing, you've got some applications where you need the vast compute potential, like weather forecasting. You need huge clusters of compute. But to make my photo look pretty and sparkly, I can do that using a button on my phone. So there are some things that you'll be able to do with just mobile devices or locally be on a laptop, and there's going to be more of those over time. And there's also going to be entirely new emergent applications at the top end of compute, which will continue to blow all of our minds as it gets powerful and stronger.
Are there any interesting applications that excite you? I know we keep talking about spreadsheets, which would be amazing, but are there any areas that excite you?
I think I am most focused on the things I wish I had right now in my life, or the things that feel manual, the things that are, why can't AI do this yet? There's been jokes recently that AI still can't upgrade my printer, can it? So we're not done yet. But there are very real things that take me time. And I think, again, is speaking to the founders, the entrepreneurs listening, the things that you find manual will soon be hopefully more automated. But that's where I see the most excitement. I'll give you an example. If there's a problem right now where I have to read through someone's SharePoint, do research against their SharePoint privately, which maybe involves downloading lots of files because there is no tool that can easily what we call RAG, search and explore and learn from their SharePoint. And then I have to go through those files and I have to read them, summarize them, take those summaries, feed that into a web search to do some research around, what are the potential improvement opportunities within this document. And then I have to condense it all back down and turn that into a single proposal with costing. That is a workflow. It is a process. It involves bouncing around different tools. Those are the sort of opportunities that I would love to see solved in the near term, and therefore excite me the most because they're so tangibly close. And I know that they're possible because we're all doing it anyway right now, just manually.
You and I have talked about this a couple of times, and you've touched on it there a little bit, I think. And that's this idea that will jobs go, but also are jobs changing? And you and I have talked about how software engineers may well be a different model in the future. And how do people gain experience when the experienced people can use these tools already? Do you want to elaborate a bit more on that? I'll be interested in Romesh's view on this one.
Yeah, I think it's tricky. It requires time to understand what other people are doing, which is not always time that employers will give. Therefore, maybe you have to do that out of in your own time. And what I've talked about there is, the greatest way of staying up to date is just spending a weekend at a conference surrounded by like-minded people where you'll just get so many ideas of what they're doing. But that's hard to do if you have a family. Again, plug, we've got a crash at the conference in June. But these things are hard. They are hard for certain people to engage with. Or you have to, off your own bat in your evenings, go and learn and see what other people are talking about. And again, in many people's jobs, that's hard to do. So how do you stay on top of this? I would implore employers to really invest in their own team, to give them that time, or to say to your team, if there's anything that you would like to spend time to go and learn, or you want to attend a lunchtime Strive and Thrive webinar, or you want to attend an online conference, or you want to study a book, or just take an hour a week just to go and read up on things. Let them do it. Encourage them to do it and let them do it. But even more, give them time aligned with their work to explore some of this stuff as well. So talk to your team, find out who's got these use cases that could potentially be automated, and just give them a little bit of time every week to try and figure out how to use some of this technology more advanced to automate that as well. Just ring fence it. So whether doesn't have to be Google's 20% time, it could be a 5% time or a 2% time, but just a couple hours a week. It's basically an extended lunch hour where you're saying to someone, go and spend this time and do this thing and learn and upskill for yourself. Because I think that's the hardest thing. We can tell people that they need to upskill, but I think employers have to encourage it and realize that it is some of the strongest ROI that you will give, just letting some of your team go and figure out new ways of working.
Stimulate experimentation, I guess, within your workforce, right? What's your view on that, Romesh, as a kind of more sort of business orientated role that you play?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, isn't it? I mean, because there's just a huge amount of disruption that is going to be is being caused and is going to be caused by this. I think to your point, John, it's being proactive, it's being front foot, trying to keep up with latest developments as a business leadership team, encouraging your staff to invest time, helping them with training, etc. I think messaging is important as well, because one of my clients, very progressive, forward-looking business, they're looking at this kind of approach now, and the idea is actually it's not a threat, it's an opportunity. Ultimately, and John, you kind of mentioned this, AI can do all the mundane, boring tasks that you don't want to do, ultimately, that are kind of mind-numbing, that are not value added, right? And hopefully, and this is, hopefully businesses, and certainly this is the intention of the business I've just referred to, they want to free up the time of their teams to actually do more value added, more creative, more powerful activities, which is going to be more meaningful to them individually, and of course the business. And I think that's a huge opportunity. Will there be some fallout from this? I think so. Yeah, looking at the other side, I think there's a huge potential for disruption in a negative kind of way. Probably, potential job losses, that kind of stuff. I just don't know how that's going to play out, and how many businesses will take that more progressive approach, and which ones will take that more regressive approach, and that's, I guess, what where that uncertainty lies. So it's a kind of wait and see.
Key points on that, which
Sure.
is number one, this idea that AI will take all the boring jobs and let us do the exciting creative work. We're beginning to see that maybe that's a bit of a fallacy, and it's much worse than that. It's the other way around. AI is able to do some incredibly good, high-value creative work, and yet some of the most mundane, routine jobs are still human. It's maybe upside down as a way of thinking. AI is able to do incredible writing and editing and copy editing. If you don't know that your team are using the AI to negotiate their salary, then you should know that, because your team are definitely using ChatGPT to help them with their negotiations, as could you. There are people I know who, again, there are important risk and safety elements to doing this, but they are using the private LLMs to use as a therapist and a coach. It's a private conversation. They can type in their journals every day in terms of how they're doing, and they can just get it to use it as almost like an intelligent mirror for how they're feeling about the world, and help them to cope better. More of the strive and thrive elements of being a founder. So all of those are very, very creative, high-end activities that the AI is solving. In terms of what are the threats to jobs, the one example I can give from one of our clients recently is we developed a huge amount of automation. Some of it was machine learning, but it was mostly an automation job for an accounting team. And what we saw as a result was, first of all, we worked with their junior accountants, their training accountants. We taught them how to code. So they started replacing all the spreadsheets flying around the organization with Python scripts. And then we worked with them to make sure they were high quality, reliable, they were error-free. And now when they've got accounts come through, they can click a button in Excel, it whizzes it up, runs it through a load of Python, and then they've got this reporting server, and people can download those reports back into Excel. Amazing automation capability for the team. And it means they can handle, again, 3 to 10x more field work for this audit team on a weekly basis as a result several years down the line. It also means that their own team are responsible for the technology, so they have been upskilled along the way. It also means that maybe they're not hiring as many new trainee accountants as they used to be, but I don't think they had some dramatic job losses. So I think that's probably the most realistic path forward, is sort of keeping teams where they are, and then just realizing you can take on 5x more work as a company. I think that's what we'll see more than anything.
True productivity. We touched on productivity in the last session with Matt on, will this really drive the kind of productivity? You and I have seen some really super examples in government of where productivity improvements could really be driven by thinking more sensibly and structurally about how these could be applied and adopted.
And I suppose, going back to my comment on the reduction of mundane tasks, I suppose that's automation generally. AI, I suppose, is the more kind of higher end element of that, where there's that kind of proactivity. But I'm certainly hoping that there is going to be that opportunity for less interesting tasks to be eliminated or or reduced somewhat. That's really interesting. Mike, what are your thoughts on it?
John's given me a good example recently, and I've seen it in myself, right? Writing a bid recently, as you know, Romesh, I've done a massive bid. Actually getting an AI to help speeds up the ability to do it. It's no longer a need to have a team doing a bid. You can have the strategic leaders designing the concept and getting a pretty good outline done really fast. In coding, you've got very good coders now who are probably tech leaders before, they're doing less coding, running teams. They can now probably use AI to do a lot of the coding and don't need such big technical teams. And so what I think, the example of accountancy there was interesting, right? Can you run an accountancy team with less people nowadays in the future and do the same amount of work? And it's the more experienced accountants that are around because they're into that decision-making role with more automation supporting them. And I think that's an interesting insight, right? And that creates, how do these people learn? How would you pull a lawyer through if actually a lot of it is automated and it's only the experienced lawyers you need? Same in accounting, in your roles, same in software engineering, same in innovation, design, creativity, all those sorts of things. The high-end people will be able to do it much faster and they can get much more automation in there. And it's then people coming out of universities and learning, how do they gain the experience needed? Because actually people don't need those roles for people to learn the experience. I think there'll be this interesting dimensional change to employment. And there's lots of talks of billion-pound companies with 3 people. I kind of think that's a nice anecdote, but I kind of can see how that's a vision that could be realized. 3 very clever people, different mental models, different skill sets, working together with lots of that kind of automation being the right word, probably, AI behind them. I think there's that kind of vision and capability there.
I think my worry with that kind of situation, using that very extreme example, 3 people, $1 billion company, is ultimately where are they going to make the money from? If less and less people are employed, where is income going to be derived from for these businesses? So I think there has to be a kind of balance, right? There's that analogy that
there's got to be value add, right? Whatever people do, there's got to be a value added to the services you're doing. I totally accept that, but it's an interesting visual and concept to consider.
It is. I think it needs to be balanced in the round with society, though, right? But yeah, absolutely.
I think there's 2 ways of thinking about that. One is we enter a world where what could be done by a 100-person company can now be done by 3 people, and you've got 97 people looking for a job. The other extreme is a world where those 100 people are now powering 30 companies between them, and your sort of global GDP or output goes up 30x over whatever period of time. And the answer is somewhere in the middle, but I think it's slightly reductive to assume that it just means you've got 97 people now out of a job. I think you do have a GDP benefit boost coming from, a global productivity boost sort of available on the table, but it depends if we are sort of deploying this technology equitably or not.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's key, and it needs to be and that's the tricky thing. And actually that leads me to ask you this question, John. I recently watched an interview with Professor Geoffrey Hinton, who's known as the godfather of AI, I understand. He's a Nobel Prize winner. He wrote the structures and algorithms behind AI. I was quite surprised, actually, because I was expecting him to be quite front foot and hopeful about AI generally, but he really wasn't. He talked about the development of AI agents, which, to achieve their main goals would create sub-goals, which would encourage them to try and obtain more control, which wasn't necessarily a good thing for us. And he saw that as a significant risk. What are your thoughts on that?
I think we need better sci-fi. The risks we worry about are not really the risks we should worry about. I think a good way of the mental model for AI that I have is treating it like a very mischievous toddler. They're very good at finding boundaries and finding basically exploits. Don't do this. Okay, well, I'll do this then. You didn't technically tell me not to do this. AI is like that. It's sort of in a cold-hearted manner. If you give it a job and it can find a better way of doing it, that maybe you didn't lay down the barriers, then it will do that. It will find that way. One of the first examples I saw of this was a wonderful presentation by Jack Clark of OpenAI at the time, the head of safety, which again is on YouTube. If you Google policy puzzles Jack Clark, then you'll find that. It was an event that I helped to run back in 2018, and he showed this video of a mechanical arm, and it's basically meant to do like balls. It's meant to flick a puck, and it's meant to sort of try and get it as close to the other puck as possible. And it realizes that within the rules you're not forbidding the ability to start slapping the side of the table until it ends up right next to the puck. So in these simulations, it just starts whacking the table with its own arm to solve the problem without touching the puck twice. And nobody thought to stop it from doing this. And I think that's a great analogy for what we see as potential future risks is, have we thought carefully around what are the rules of the road, and making sure that we know if an AI goes off the rails, what would it look like? Can we effectively red team that as designers of these systems and really think through what are all the different ways that this could go off the rails? Now, red team style people in the world of security and penetration testing, they're really good at this. And you have people who are good at this in the world of AI. We're one of them. We do a lot of this kind of work for the government, thinking what are all the ways that AI systems could be mischievous and maliciously complete your task, but like not the way you wanted it to. And we're seeing lots of examples of this now. And a lot of the AI harms stem from, again, that same almost like mischievous compliance with the rules. So things like bias. It's actually finding a shortcut for giving you what you want, which is replicate this set of data, but it's doing it in a way that it's biased. It's actually, you didn't specify, don't be too biased. And we've done a lot of work with DCIT in the last year, investigating bias in AI hiring systems. And there are real biases. There's real concerns on the table that they are definitely selecting differently based on your racial and age and gender background. So is that a problem? Well, sure. What does the problem look like if it's happening? Hard to tell, because no one's testing all of these tools except the tools themselves, who some of them are definitely doing the right thing, and some of them, it's an expensive thing to do, and we don't even know how to do it. There's no sort of documented processes for AI assurance at the moment. So this is the world we're talking about now. It's more about assurance, compliance, and figuring out how do we think about the risks and do that sort of risk analysis of these systems before we put them live in front of customers and they can cause harm.
Good.
Thank you. Yeah, so the guardrails are mission critical, aren't they? They're really, really important. So yeah, let's hope that a suitable structure is built amongst all the relevant stakeholders. We are running out of time, but I want to ask you one very, very quick question, which I'd like you to answer in a couple of sentences. A little challenge for you, John. Can you give us a vision of what AI, as to how AI is going to shape our society in the future? What's society going to look like?
I'll give you the positive vision. There's a lot of ways that it can cause negative impact. Like any technology, right? It's going to be 3 steps forwards and 2 steps back for a while. It's the same with the invention of the motor car, right? It took a while to figure out that we needed things like traffic lights and dotted lines down the center of the road, and then cat's eyes came a bit later. It's going to be similar, and I think there were so many future problems that we just cannot anticipate yet. I remember hearing someone say that future forecasting isn't predicting the car; it's predicting the traffic jam. It's sort of the emergent complexity effects that will be downstream of all of these technological shifts. So there will be all sorts of unpredictable things to come that we'll be discovering, and we need to learn and rapidly respond to those as quickly as we can, and always be calling out the risks and harms whenever we see them, and not letting companies and governments getting away with sort of abuse just because it's faster and cheaper and more profitable to do things in a certain way. Like, there are harms to certain increasingly subsectors of society, the people who don't have power. That's the risks. Positives. There are a lot of problems in the world, whether it's disaster response, whether it's the healthcare systems, whether it's how the efficiency of government's running, whether it's the efficiency of small companies being able to challenge big incumbents. There's a lot of really exciting positives that will emerge from that. You've got an amazing paper that came out, Nature, published just a few months ago, where you have the reduced time to diagnosis of rare diseases reduced by a factor of 45% using AI workflows. Okay, that is a huge reduction for a very, very complicated, hard, expensive thing. And I can't wait to see all of these future papers that are yet to come out with these amazing insights and results of what can this stuff do now that is causing real benefits, because there are certain problems we have in the world that could really do with solving sometime soon. And I hope that it's going to play a major part in moving things forwards, at least 3 steps forwards and maybe only 1 step backwards.
Thanks very much, John. I'm going to do one takeaway from this for me, and I think it was one that emerged from the conversation. But is that idea of employers getting your employees to have that capacity to experiment. I think hiding now and waiting for the answer is not the right. You've got to keep experimenting in a market that's moving as fast as the experimentation that you're able to conduct. And I think supporting entrepreneurs and business owners and managers to support their teams to experiment, it will drive the kind of benefits that people want to see. But Romesh, I'll hand over to you to close out. Thanks, John.
Brilliant, thank you, John. I'm really glad you kind of ended on a very positive vision. That was fantastic. It's been a really interesting discussion. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank everyone who's watched or listened. Strive and Thrive is currently a monthly series, and we have a great pipeline of interesting people to share their insights with you. The next session is on the 14th of March. We'll share more details on social media over the next few weeks. We're now on YouTube, and we have a podcast on Spotify. Please look us up. Massive thanks to Mike and the Strive and Thrive team that are helping significantly in the background. Thanks again, John, and see you all next time.
Cheers, John. Thank you very much. Thanks, Romesh.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.